Hey guys, if you don't have a lot of fun giving women orgasms, then maybe you should seriously reconsider your sexuality. To put it very bluntly, giving women orgasms is one of the most pleasurable activities I can think of, if not the most pleasurable activity. Take a look at it. If you give women orgasms, particularly the woman that you happen to be with or that you are interested in, you know what I'm talking about, or in a relationship with. If you give that woman high-quality orgasms, the kind of orgasms that last a long time and really reach her to her soul, if there is such a thing, or to her innermost being, then that woman will treat you like a king, will treat you like the male god that you are. And by the way, you will want to treat her the same way. That's how it works. Now, giving a woman an orgasm, giving a woman pleasure in the form of an orgasm, is both complicated and simple. The simple things, the mechanics of it, we're told all the time. Well, you have to know what a clitoris is. If you don't know that, you shouldn't be listening to this. You're way back in pre-kindergarten at that level. Or you should know what the G-spot is, or you should know what foreplay is, and all this kind of stuff. And we're way beyond that. We're assuming that you at least know those things. The fine-tuning of the whole operation, if you want to call it that, comes down to orchestrating that orgasm of your woman. And I want to say at this point that although women seem to be anatomically roughly similar, there are vast, vast differences. Each woman is very, very specific in terms of her receptivity to pleasure, in terms of those areas, those tiny little spots in her body, in the vaginal clitoral area around the G-spot and other places on her body. These are very specific, woman by woman. And if you're good, if you're really good, you can catch on to those really quickly. Doesn't have to take you 2 or 3 times or longer, for heaven's sake. Making love to that woman, you can catch on really, really fast. Let's start with a couple of basic essentials. The penis, the phallus, as Jacques Lacan always used to call it, the male member, is useful for some things. It's obviously useful for penetration, as is the finger, by the way, or the fingers, by the way. It can be used if well trained, specifically for manipulation of areas in the woman's genital area, and that's really, really quite fun. If you can refrain from having an orgasm at that point, and really you need to be able to do that, then it's immensely enjoyable. Women also enjoy having the penis of the man caressing and touching other parts of their bodies. Between the breasts is like really obvious. It's fun for you. It's fun for her. Around the back. Other places, indeed, they find it fun and interesting. They find it fun and interesting to feel the spasms, the response of your penis against other parts of their bodies. They really, really do. But let's look at that other sublimely expressive part of your anatomy. Well, of course, there are the fingers, and, well, we could talk more about fingers in a moment, but there is that marvelous thing called the tongue. The tongue. Kissing is so vitally important in any sexual experience. Kissing is the thing that turns a woman on in a certain way more than any other thing and gets her ready. Because when she feels your tongue doing the things that it can do against her tongue, against the top of her mouth, the bottom, all over, and other parts of her body. But let's start with the mouth. Let's start with kissing. What is she imagining when you are kissing her? She is imagining your tongue on her clitoris. She is imagining if your tongue is expressive and sharp and like electrically charged. Women always tell me that I have like this little electrical charge in my tongue. I don't know where I got it. Maybe it's inherited. Maybe I have batteries inside myself somewhere, but that little spark, that roughness, that little spark right on the tip there. It's really a marvelous thing, and when the woman feels that in her mouth against her tongue, she wants you. She wants you down there. She wants you doing the same thing to her clit. She wants you doing the same thing all over, and she is maximally, manifestly receptive to you in any way that you want her to be. In any way that you want her to be. You have her in the palm of your hands, so to speak, when you are a really good kisser. The tongue. Let's just spend another moment on the tongue itself. You can train and practice with your tongue in your own way. Giving women orgasms is one of the most pleasurable activities I can think of, if not the most pleasurable activity. Take a look at it. If you give women orgasms, particularly the woman that you happen to be with or that you are interested in, you know what I'm talking about, or in a relationship with. If you give that woman high-quality orgasms, the kind of orgasms that last a long time and really reach her to her soul, if there is such a thing, or to her innermost being, then that woman will treat you like a king, will treat you like the male god that you are. And by the way, you will want to treat her the same way. That's how it works. Now, giving a woman an orgasm, giving a woman pleasure in the form of an orgasm, is both complicated and simple. The simple things, the mechanics of it, we're told all the time. Well, you have to know what a clitoris is. If you don't know that, you shouldn't be listening to this. You're way back in pre-kindergarten at that level. Or you should know what the G-spot is, or you should know what foreplay is, and all this kind of stuff. And we're way beyond that. We're assuming that you at least know those things. The fine-tuning of the whole operation, if you want to call it that, comes down to orchestrating that orgasm of your woman. And I want to say at this point that although women seem to be anatomically roughly similar, there are vast, vast differences. Each woman is very, very specific in terms of her receptivity to. By the way, we're doing our IPO next month. Investors, you know what to do. Talk to your investment advisor today. And, of course, there is how can I say it? Kissing, of course, takes place in other parts of the body other than the mouth. The neck is marvelous. The ears are marvelous. The breasts are, of course, marvelous. All of these are marvelous. But caressing a woman while kissing her, and even if it just begins in it's a basic kiss, we're kissing, and our lips are touching, and then maybe a little bit of tongue action comes. You have to watch for that. You really have to be a good body reader, not a mind reader, but you can feel it. You know when she's ready for that. And you start, in a certain way, you know how far she intends to go. You have a good reading of her intention. Once that tongue comes into action, you get how far is she willing to go? Well, you both have to kind of reach that level where there's a mutual understanding of where and how far you want to go on this particular occasion. So when the tongue action begins, then additional caressing becomes involved. And come on, guys, you know what to do. I don't want to sound like some kind of high school sex teacher by saying, well, it's not a matter of grabbing and grasping and groping and all that kind of stuff. It's not to give you pleasure, guys, that you are touching her breasts or her buttocks or her thighs or any other part of her. It's not to turn you on. You're already turned on. It's to turn her on, for Christ's sake. But so many men, I'm told, act like that. They're grasping away and touching away, and this is their way of getting a hard-on. Jeepers, that's like really stupid. Really stupid. It's all about giving her pleasure. To the extent that you're not giving her pleasure, you shouldn't be doing it. If it's all about you, you shouldn't be doing it. This may sound radical, but it's true. So you're doing all of those things with your tongue, but you're also, a strange thing to say, and a friend of mine says this in her own podcast, but it's all an expression of love, even if it's only for the moment. But that's not what should be in your mind at all right now. Love is this universal thing. It can either be short-termed or long-termed or deep or shallow, but in my opinion, actually, it's always deep. It should always be deep. The expression of your body and your tongue and your mind and your affection and your brain and all of your senses and your sensuality should be the same, whether you imagine that at that particular moment you're with the love of your life, your true flame, your ultimate soulmate, and all of that will be with you in all lifetimes to come and has been with you in all lifetimes before that. Okay, that should be no different than when you're just with somebody. Well, we met and we maybe gone out a couple of times, we've been fooling around, and maybe this is the time when we're going to have sex. It should all be the same. If you bring that same level of emotional, spiritual passion every time a sexual episode is beginning to happen to you, you will have a much better time, much more pleasure, and so would she, because she feels that. She feels that. She feels that she's not, quote-unquote, sacrificing anything. She feels that she's not letting go of anything. She doesn't feel like she's giving in to something. You know, there's this idea that women give in to guys when they start pawing them and that kind of thing. It should never be a matter of giving in. The point is not to make a woman give in, guys. The point is to make a woman love you in that particular encounter. The point is to make the woman out of love to want to give herself to you because she knows that in giving herself to you, you're a guy who wants to give her pleasure. You're a guy who wants to bring her there, bring her to the place where the sky's the limit. Not just have as they used to say in the movies, a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, kind of an episode. This is extremely important. The other thing is, if everything seems to be a exercise to bring you to that point of penetration, however long that penetration lasts, it could last from, low of 45 minutes to a high of an hour and a half, just to give you a range that's typical for me, that's really kind of not the be-all and end-all. The be-all and end-all is her orgasm. And you know what? You can read and tell if a certain woman is going to have an orgasm only during penetration sex, during penetration sex, or probably not during penetration sex, no matter what you do. Now, although I'm very young, under 40, so I've only been with 900 some women. I know that there are people out there in my audience who are older, guys out there in my audience who are older, and by numerical count have had more experiences, but I don't think a lot of men have had as many wonderful shared orgasms. And here we're going to talk about something else briefly, since I mentioned shared orgasms. The be-all and end-all of sexual intercourse should not necessarily be to have a mutual orgasm. With some women, it is very unlikely to happen. Now, one strategy is to be doing oral sex on a woman, and just at the moment you think that she is going to come, then you put it in. Well, sometimes that works really well, and sometimes it doesn't, because sometimes that interrupts the event and the experience for her. Sometimes you begin to feel that little shiver, and yeah, she's wet enough down there, and whatever, but it kind of creates a little bit of a bleep in the experience. And you just may, and she just may, have a better time if you continue the cunnilingus up until and through that experience. And then some women hold back right at that point. And yes, I acknowledge for some women the intensity is so great that they don't want it to really happen or really last for as long as it should or could. And on previous episodes of this wonderful podcast, Explore Ecstatic Sensuality, we have discussed, yea, verily, we have talked about women's orgasms lasting a very long time, primarily based on research done in Turkey. And if you want to go to a country where women have very long orgasms, apparently that country is Turkey, or at least in a certain research lab. But that, laying that aside for a moment, this whole concept of this is the be-all and end-all of the shared orgasm it's a wonderful thing when it's happened. Really, I don't have enough brain cells to count the number of times it's happened to me. But what we're looking for here is the woman's pleasure. The woman's pleasure. That's what it's all about. Her orgasm is extremely complex. Sort of step outside of yourself, not emotionally or anything like that, but step outside of yourself and really think about all the spasms and all the firings of her nerves and her corpuscles and everything in her entire body and how they're working together in that moment or those moments, that very long period of time. And a lot of us don't take the time or don't take the effort or don't have the concentration, or we're thinking of something else. We're either thinking about, I got to think about something else, or I don't, so I'm not going to come. That's very typical. That's a very typical thought. I'm not going to think about this woman. I'm going to think about something else. I'm going to think about taking out the garbage, because after all, nothing is less sexy than taking out the garbage. Therefore, if I'm thinking about that, I'm not going to ejaculate. Whoa, Nelly. Whoa, Nelly. That's, come on, guys. Admit that not only have you done that, but the famous sexperts, not the tantric ones and the ones who are really smart and sophisticated, but the ones, since you've been in high school, your buddies in high school, told you, don't think about this babe here that you've just mauled for 45 minutes. Think about something. As soon as you get to that point, stop thinking about that. Think about something else, so you're not going to come right away. This is like high school thinking. This is like old-fashioned thinking. Yes, you want to learn ejaculatory control, which is not the topic of this particular video or podcast, depending on the format that you're listening to. But the significant thing, the most significant thing, is to, I'm repeating myself, I probably said it 16 times in the last 16 minutes and 43 seconds, the woman's orgasm. It is so fun, it is so pleasurable, it is so delightful to experience that with her. And another thing, one of the most enjoyable, the most pleasurable things that a couple can have is for the man to be given the opportunity to watch intimately while a woman masturbates. And you're saying, oh, that sounds kind of creepy, or, If you're saying that, you don't like women. Just for the record, if you're saying that, maybe you should try another gender or species or something like that. It's wonderful and it's so informative and instructive to watch a woman turn herself on and even go all the way. It's fascinating to, watch her particular strategies. Now, a lot of them are similar to circling the finger around the clitoris and that sort of stuff. Some women, however, are much more attuned to their bodies. And that's that kind of attunement that it's fun to watch and sort of experience with them. And then when you're engaging in that activity misnamed foreplay, whatever the bleep that means, join in. Encourage her to do that. Use your fingers with her. Use your tongue as your tongue is doing what it's doing down in the clitoral area. Encourage her to be doing the same thing in that area with her finger. That's immensely exciting. She will feel you kind of taking her lead. Let her fingers be the lead. Let her body be the lead in finding exactly the things that turn her on. Don't be afraid to make it last. I mean, I'm stating the obvious, but that's really, really true and important. It sounds to me like this has been more advice for men than for women, and that may be because, in a certain sense, men need the advice more than women do. But that really isn't true. Women out there, there's a very important rule that I'm going to make the theme of other episodes of this podcast. And that rule is, in general, it is a very good rule not to initiate or respond favorably to romantic behavior with anyone you are not attracted to or who is not attracted to you. By attraction, I'm referring to physical sexual attraction. Otherwise, there is a danger of bad feelings on both sides. Now, this may sound like a radical proposition, but in general, I think it's a very, very true one. And it's a fair one, if you come to think about it. It really is. There is always a danger, if you're a guy, that you'll find yourself in a situation with a woman and you'll be having this really interesting conversation with her. You've just gone to hear, your favorite musical group, whether it's Snoop Dogg, just kidding, whether it's the Los Angeles Philharmonic, they're not so great, one of those people. Or, no matter who it is, and you're just in this great mood, and maybe you've had a couple of drinks. Drinks are an interesting thing that we'll talk about some other time. Or other stuff, and, you start fooling around. All of a sudden, her arm is around your shoulder, or she's giving you that kind of a little look. And you're thinking, okay. And your natural response is to go in there and put your hand somewhere. Or just, very, very affectionate. Put your arm around her and maybe look into her eyes. Oh, eyes are a big deal. There was a guy I knew, I've talked about on other episodes of this podcast, who said that he was the only person, the woman he was involved with at that time was very sexy, but he was the only guy who had looked into her eyes while he was having sex. Now, that's hard if you're going down on a woman. That's an interesting trick. If you're doing cunnilingus on a woman and you can still look into her eyes, you're a better man than I am. But it's so important. That was simply an aside. But then you get into this kind of a sexual situation. And everything I've said so far in this episode is absolutely true, absolutely applies. All the love that you would have for your true flame, whatever you want to call it, your woman, your mate, as some people have referred to it, should go into every experience of intercourse aimed at, that's not the right word, every experience of real sex. It's not like every peck on the cheek should carry that with it. Believe me, that'd be tough. But that having been said, is a real danger, because then you can find, if you're a good lover like I am, you've got a woman there who's like crazy about you. And flip that for, women. If a guy is, you've had the kind of nice experience and you feel like being a little bit nice to the guy, and maybe letting him, do something relatively minor with you, and there's always a danger then that he's going to really fall for you in a big way, and then you're in trouble. So there should be this law of mutuality, and it's not that easy to figure out. I know it very well. 96% of women I'm attracted to are attracted to me. I think that's actually low. It should be higher. But that's not true for all of you out there. So just bear that in mind. That's something what should they teach in classes about relationships and sex, intimacy, and all this kind of stuff? There's a lot of wonderful people out there talking about these things, but they don't talk so much about reading the other person and also being very clear in your mind how attractive that person is to you. That is really important. You have to know that. You have to understand that. attractive physically. Okay, you know what? A lot of people can say, well, there's this woman, and she's so brilliant. We have great conversations, and she's so funny, and all this other kind of stuff. But if there's no attraction, if there's no sexual attraction, if there's no zaza-zoom, a word we've used in this podcast on several previous occasions, then just be very, 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 very careful. Very, very, very careful. I've had guys come to me, and they said, I am so happy that I've been listening to things that you said on my podcast, because now that I can read women now so well, it's very important to read women and read what they really think and want. Once you do that, that's going to improve your sex life immediately, instantly. Now, it's easy to say it's all about communication, all this kind of stuff, but I mean, it's a very not only communication, but it's also a matter of perceptiveness. Perceptivity, is that the word? Receptivity to what is really going on in the other person, not just in the surface level of their mind and their thinking, that little narrative that goes on in people's heads all the time. And they're thinking about a whole bunch of other stuff. They're thinking about, this guy is maybe, what's he really going to do for a living, and all that kind of stuff, or what does he do for a living, or is he true? Is he telling me the truth when he says, he's been divorced and hasn't been with anyone since then, and his wife is trash, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's all this not conversation, this monologue that goes on in people's minds all the time, and in yours too. And then you get to the point where it's so hard to kind of tune that out long enough to really figure out what's going on in the other person's mind, the woman's mind, let's just say, and in this case, beneath all that surface chatter, all those ruminations, as someone I know says, and get down to the level of feelings that are beneath all of that. Feelings that have nothing to do with any misgivings or enthusiasm she has regarding the present moment, the present encounter. Get down to that deeper level. And when you just scratch that surface a little bit, and you'll begin to find out what's really going on in that person. Because who a person is not that rumination, is that not that constant dialogue, either in their monologue, rather, either the one that's going on in their head, or that dialogue that you're having with you at that particular moment on the surface. In a certain way, that's all chatter. You want to get beneath that and really begin to find that real person, because it is the real person who's going to have an orgasm in your company. It's not they're thinking about what their girlfriend Jane was up to, or what's happening at their job, or anything along those lines. It's that real person that you're going to make come. And when that coming happens, when that orgasm happens, all that chatter better be out of her head. And all that chatter better be out of your head, because you're missing it. You're missing the experience. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. It's like turning out the football game when, it's first and goal, and things are really heating up, and what should be on your mind now is like that big experience, which is yours, which can be yours to have, yours to take, yours to experience. So this has been this little brief episode, and the whole idea of this brief episode is to share with you a little bit about the pleasure of orgasms, not from a mechanical point of view, let's just say, not from a technical point of view, from the point of view of pleasure, the point of view of, for the man, giving pleasure. If you don't enjoy, to repeat what I said at the top of this episode, if you don't enjoy giving a woman pleasure, then think about some other kind of activity to engage in. Because there ain't nothing better, man. You can go to some music event and yell and scream at some artist that you like, and you're feeling really hot and enthusiastic about something. And, but it's like imagining you were the guy on stage. You're the guy that all the women are out there and they're, creaming in their pants for at that moment. That's how you feel, man. You're the man who's this great turn-on person. You can turn them on. It's almost like having that pre-orgasmic and orgasmic experience going into that. It's really, the feeling is a lot like being that guy on stage, man. Whoever that is for you. Being that maximum turn-on person for women. That's you. Because you're not just having sex. You're not just giving an orgasm to one woman. You're giving orgasms to the goddess in your woman. You're giving the orgasm to all women you've ever met. All women you've ever dreamed of meeting. That's what you're doing. Oh, yeah. You guys listen to this podcast, and you babes too, you know that I always have like one more thing. It's like my grandfather, I think it was, told me that there was a show on TV when he was young or middle-aged and young, I guess, called Columbo. And in Columbo, there was this guy, this detective type of character who dressed kind of funny, I was told. And he would always say, be interrogating somebody or just asking a few casual questions of somebody, and then he'd say, oh, just one more question or something like that. Well, I've got just one more thing for you, and it's not going to make all of you out there happy. Those of us in the sex advice game here, yeah, hey, I respect all of you characters. You're doing a wonderful job, and I know some of you personally, and I endorse you all top to bottom, hook, line, and sphincter. But what I've got to say at this point is that, you know, a lot of you talk about self-love. Self-love. And golly jeepers gee. Something else my grandfather used to say. We don't say that anymore. For those of us under 40, that's like nowhere. But self-love. Self-love. There's no better way, if you're a guy out there, to feel self-love than to be able to give a woman a colossal, monumental orgasm. Just a piece of advice. You know, they've got you sitting around and thinking about yourself and gazing in your navel or wherever, you know, gazing wherever else you want to gaze. And they've got you saying, love yourself, again and again and again. And they're not really telling you what about yourself that you should love. Hello? You know, is it, golly, I don't know, is it you have a hairy chest, or that, I don't know, you've memorized the Canterbury Tales backwards and forwards, or that you're a great football player? Well, if you're not a great football player, you can't love yourself too well if that's your standard of what it is to be able to love yourself. Does that make any sense to you? You know? But one thing we can all do, unless someone has cut out your tongue and cut off your male member, but one thing us guys can all do is to give women a great orgasm. And the things I've been saying in this episode are only a part of that. Only a part of it. So I'm kind of flipping the whole thing around, like the pancake at whatever that place you have pancakes at is. You're flipping the whole thing around and saying, okay, instead of just saying, love yourself, I'm saying, well, here's something that you can really love yourself for, but you got to learn it to a certain degree. Or you got to take what's natural in yourself and think about it more and take a different strategy toward it and develop it more than you have been. I got to tell you, being able to give a great orgasm is something that makes up for a lot of, I don't know, what you might call deficiencies. Women may be looking for X, Y, and Z in a man, and those things are often material or social. You know, they got to want to be with a man who's a certain social standing, who their friends are going to say, boy, you know, he's just the social standing that I want. He's a lawyer. Oh, goody goody. He's a doctor. He's an accountant. He's a hedge fund manager. Man, that's the best. Women out there, I'm sure you all want to marry hedge fund managers because your friends are going to say that's a great thing to, you know, want to marry. But if you're, you know, happen to be of those racial groups that are prejudiced against, you're not going to become a hedge fund manager. I can't tell you how to do it. But I can tell you a little bit about being able to give a woman, your woman, or women in general, a better orgasm. And one thing I have to tell you, and that is to say When a woman is with a man who gives her fantastic orgasms and treats her as the goddess recipient, if you will, of fantastic orgasms, she gives that off, and her friends know it. Her women friends know it. She gives off that electrical vibration that she's getting, not just getting laid. The term getting laid is so absurd. It sounds like, you're a chicken or something like that, or you're a brick. Well, they had bricklayers getting laid. But, women give off that vibe when they're getting it. And to repeat, not just getting, some guy doing the usual sort of trivial stuff, superficial stuff, but when he's really giving her orgasms. That's the whole nature of the beast, and that's something we can all learn. I don't need to learn it, but you men can teach yourself how to give women great orgasms. And what I've said in this particular episode is only scratching the surface, and we have so much more to say. There's been so much research on this subject, which I've covered in previous podcasts, and which I am going to cover in greater detail in the future. We hope you've enjoyed this episode here of Explore Ecstatic Sensuality, and we'll be talking about orgasms and other sorts of stuff, in our next episode. So stay tuned, and don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and on that little chip we've just installed in your brain. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and to thank the woman who inspired me to undertake the task of doing this podcast. Her name is Anita DiFrancesco. She has her own podcast, and that is specifically what inspired me to do this. It is called Discover Joyous Love. And that podcast is a successor to a podcast she did previously called It's Your Voice. Anita DiFrancesco is a psychotherapist, a somatic psychotherapist, an authority on organomic therapy and psychotherapy, the work of Wilhelm Reich. She is a renowned author of 2 books, Live Free, Recreate and Liberate Your Life, and The Donna Gentili Story, a spellbinding true crime thriller about the brutal murder of her first cousin and her attempts to identify the killer. I strongly recommend Anita DiFrancesco as a relationship counselor, as a psychotherapist, and as someone you should listen to on her podcast. You can find her at 2 websites. One is tantrawisdom.com. The other is discoverjoyouslove.com. She also has Facebook pages, a Facebook page entitled Tantra Wisdom, her Facebook business page, and also Love and Relationship Coach. Check her out. You won't be disappointed. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Eject me, baby. Eject me all night long. Eject me, baby. Eject me all night long. Oh yeah, eject me, baby, until my back ain't got no bone. Eject me, baby. Eject me, baby. Eject me all night long. Ooh. Eject me, baby. Come on, baby, squeeze me out there. Eject me all night long. Yeah. Eject me, baby, until my back ain't got no bone. Eject me.